Hi, Michael Harvey, storyteller here. I've got another very short extract from a talk by Mac Macartney here. I've got another annotated video of him, which I encourage you to watch. Mac Macartney is the founder of a college called Embercombe in Devon, where they do many inspirational and transformational courses. I encourage you to look it up. And also, Mac himself is a very, very interesting man. This is a personal story, which is why I wanted to show it to you. It shows the power of personal storytelling and the authenticity that telling about something that happened to you can bring. It also is a brilliant example of how, for a story to be a story worth listening to, something needs to go wrong, badly wrong. And for an audience to be really hooked, the event you're describing, the bad event that you're describing that happened to you, needs to be ideally outside the experience of the listeners. Then they will be really curious about how you deal with it. And also I wanted to look at, because there's a lot of action and embodiment in this story, so I wanted to look at the action and particularly the connection between connectives and action. Have a look at the other videos about connectives and so on to get some more of that. I don't want to talk too much about it and take up your time when you really want to be looking at this video. And information. So those three things, I guess. The big simple problem in a story, the use of embodiment when you're telling, how connectives and action verbs are linked together, and also how he splices in information. And information has a totally different feeling to action. Action has the feeling of moving forward. Information steps back and is much more objective and is more of a comment on what is going on. That's definitely enough for me. Let's hear from Mac.
I love digging holes. I don't dig so many holes now that I used to dig when I was younger, but powerful in my younger days physically, I could dig a hole like nobody else. I was very proud of those holes as well because they had purely vertical sides. They'd be very precise, very neat, circular or square, and just like a shaft just dropping straight down into the...
You can see he's into it, the way he's embodying this these holes in the ground. He really has dug them, and it's clear he really was quite proud of them.
The ground. Now, at my place, Embercombe, before we got...
Now, that tiny little connective now signals that we're going into a story, and everyone in this room and everyone listening to this online immediately is cued without their realizing that we're going into a story now.
Our compost toilets, as we took the step towards becoming more sustainable, we needed to dig a number of toilet latrines.
And the now takes us from habitual activity in the past. I used to be able to dig holes really, really well. As soon as he says now, the tense changes and we're into a story. So we are now have stepped into the world of the story.
Now this is different. This is just a hole in the ground with a little shed over the top. And then you sit above that, you do your business, and gradually the hole fills up. Obviously there's some people that avoid these places the best they possibly can, but search for the flushing toilet. But the hole fills up, and at that point, you cover over the hole, and then you move the shed to another hole that you've dug, you pop the shed on there, and then that one fills up.
So he's behaving very much like someone who is giving directions to someone else. The way that he's showing us where the hole is, where the little building is on top of the hole, and then you have to pick it up and move it and so on. He's using actions much more than words, and we're following his actions much more than words.
It's not a good way to carry on, and hence this was an interim measure. So I had dug this perfect...
Did you notice that little bit of information there? The information steps back from the kind of heat and the danger of the story into something more objective. It's what you need to know to understand what's about to happen next, which is more story.
The deep hole, and it was about that deep. And then we moved the shed and put the shed on top. And it was used over about a 3-month period. And lots of people came, and all of them left an offering. And gradually, the hole filled up. It got to the point where it was at capacity, that if you used it anymore, you'd get splashback, which was very unpleasant. And so we moved the shed, and I was in charge of moving this to the new site.
You see, now he's gone back into the story. There's loads more embodiment, and he's going to carry on doing that.
So I'd spent a lot of time digging the new hole, and now we had to get 8 people to lift the shed, it's quite heavy, bring it across and put it down. We lifted the first shed off, and looking at this hole, now this hole had been there cooking over 3 months in the summer. I don't want to dwell on this point, but you understand what I'm saying. It was potent. So I saw these corrugated iron sheets, and I said, okay, before we do anything else, put these corrugated iron sheets down on top so that the worst does not happen. And so we put the corrugated iron sheets down. Now, I can't remember, I think we went for a cup of tea.
And then he jumps out of the story. So it's all very embodied. Corrugated iron sheets is quite technical. We want to make sure no one falls in, so we put the corrugated sheets on top.
And a few things happened, and I am 64 years old. So perhaps I have some reason for this lapse, this kind of sudden memory loss that occurred and led to such a difficult situation. When we came back down...
Okay, when we came back down, when is a connective. When we came back down, he's going to go into verbs in a minute. Usually what happens when you go into action, you start with the connective. So, suddenly, and then, following day are all connectives, and then bang, you're in with the verbs, action.
We started lifting this building, and there were a lot of other people all around watching and supervising, helping out. And I suddenly thought, this is dangerous. And I noticed these corrugated iron sheets there. And I bent down. I said, hold on, stop. I bent down. I grabbed the...
Nice bit of dialogue there. He embodies himself in a previous existence, as it were. And then he's actually, for the impact he needs, he's really embodying what happens.
Corrugated iron sheets. I whooshed them ahead and I stepped forward.
Super long pause, letting them sit in it, so to speak.
As I'm telling you the story, you could dwell on maybe your own version of this incident, some appalling situation, partially, if not wholly, self-created. And you take that step, and you know all hope is lost. There was that moment, I just knew. I thought, my goodness, that's it. I'm going down. I could see a ring of faces around me, just horror writ on their faces. I knew how deep the hole was. I felt terror just rush through me. I cannot think of anything else that I would rather not happen to me. And suddenly, in vertical mode, I'm shooting downwards. Down, 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 down. Something amazing happened. You've heard of levitation. I received some kind of divine ray must have hit me because I just shot vertically. It's just straight, levitated my way out of this hole. I arose like the phoenix out of the fire. Just
really nice the way he varies the physicalization, the embodiment of him coming up. First of all, it was just the hand. Then he did 2 hands. Now he's doing a much more arm-based thing.
Emerging just like this symbol of catastrophe, but perhaps redemption. I just found myself shooting vertically back upwards. And just...
Interesting that he repeated the same action 4 or 5 times. It's in the same way that in a film or a video, you might see the same action repeated from different angles. It's exactly what he's doing there.
Arrived on the side, covered, and looking at all my people. Now, I'm the founder of this place.
Okay, so he steps out. He literally steps out of the story. He's in the story and he's saying, oh, what am I going to do? This is terrible in front of all my people. And then he steps out. And as he steps out, he then comments on, comment is one of the modes we'll be looking at. He comments on himself.
My dignity is important. I represent something to my people.
This is all comment.
I felt at that moment like just falling to pieces, like just blubbing, weeping, shouting, railing against the gods. And I knew that in this moment it was really important how I responded. And as I looked and I saw the ring of faces around me, I knew that they had a...
Back in story mode. As I looked, there's a connective. We're back in story mode. He is good in scene gaze now. He's looking at the scene, the story scene around him, not the place where he really is. So he's back in story mode.
Desperate desire to laugh. But I weren't sure if that was okay. And it was the kind of laughter that you have when you just don't know what else to do. It's so horrible. And I knew at that moment there was a choice for me. And I burst out laughing. I tore my clothes off. I was stood naked there in that field. And they were on the floor, helpless with laughter, looking at me. And it suddenly occurred to me, I can make more of this. So I grabbed my filthy clothes and I started running at them, whirling it round my head. I chased them all around the field. And suddenly their laughter turned to, ah, and then run, run, run. And from this awful situation, and believe me, it was awful. Suddenly there was joy, there was happiness, there was fun. Everything was lighter.
Okay, I'll leave it there. So do try and find it. It's TEDx Newham with Mac Macartney. Have a look. It's very, very interesting indeed. This is a funny story about someone landing in you know what, but because it's Mac, he's got a very serious point behind this. I've reviewed lots of things as we went through it. There's one thing that I mentioned at the top, which I'd just like to remind you of, and that is, if you're going to have a story, you need a big, simple problem. Big, there has to be a challenge. Simple, you must be able to put it into a very short sentence of maybe half a dozen words, and it needs to be a problem. It needs to be a difficulty. Okay, good. Any comments, do just leave them or get in touch.